how much control or power do you give the actual department heads or managers versus kind of being it all top down?
Yeah. And just to circle slightly back to that last part, part of my role is actually to set all of the managers up for success. That's kind of a self-determined element. The unwritten part of my job description, I hire all the department managers. And so in doing that, I write the job descriptions. I work with them each year to make sure they know what they need to do. And on that includes that they're each individually responsible for advancing their department. So for us, most department leads will hire their team or their crew. So then they know the dates that they're going to be there. They have to ask them their dietary restrictions. They can assign certain things. So I do put a lot of power at the department lead level, and that really works for us. Of course, there's some people that miss deadlines, but it doesn't really serve us to just leave them off the list if they don't submit. At the very least, repeating what we did the year before, as long as that worked. Maybe they missed the opportunity to ask for something new, but it's in our interest to track them down and have someone call them. And maybe they're not answering emails right now, but they will answer a text. And it is important to me that we follow up with these people, because ultimately we're all going to feel it if they don't have what they need when they get to site. So having these hard deadlines doesn't really serve any of us, in my opinion. It is a guideline. So we are doing our best to remind people and keep everyone on track. And for the most part, people stick to those deadlines. But there is a little bit of flexibility in my model to make sure that we at least cover everything that we need to do.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, too, it's like when you're evaluating anyone's request, whether it's assets or catering or credentials or whatever, you have to have some mastery over their scope of work to understand whether or not that this request is appropriate or not. And that's very difficult to do. I mean, you may understand that their fencing needs, but you don't understand their IT request. And who has that information? And understanding who on your team has that information. And, you certainly can take a distributed approach, like what some people do is they do put it up to the operational department heads to, these are your 12 vendors. You need to understand their scope of work, and not leaving that to, an administrative assistant who's working for a site operations team who is being tasked with go chase down people to get all their requests for whatever. And that's not, well, maybe you do get them to, you get 75% to put their request in, but who is able to evaluate those and be critical of, is this appropriate or not?
So are you guys first circling up with the department heads and then kind of checking in with them? And then what is the chain of communication beyond that? If you feel like you're not collecting enough information, is it the department heads that should be reaching out, or is it you guys, or both? How does it work?
It depends on the event. Is what I found. The different management likes to handle it differently. Some people like to rule a little bit more with a little harder iron fist. Some people want to take a more distributed approach to it, of these are your operational areas. You need to own those areas and those vendors in there. And no way is right or wrong. I mean, and because sometimes even I've seen differentiation by management depending on the different events, because at this event it's smaller and you're using your core team. At this event it's larger and you're using a lot of contracted staff and vendors. So the oversight that they're tasking the different groups with may be different.
And
yeah,
go ahead, Gina.
I just think everybody, every show is different. On a smaller show, there are less department leads or less people that are actually involved in the prep. But I do think that concept is something that's important, especially on the smaller shows, or really just any show that has people coming on site to manage these details. If someone promises power or catering to a team that's coming in, if that information doesn't pass down the line, then those resources aren't going to be there when they get there. And then it's going to be a challenge to add that later. So I think, it's important as the producer of the event to understand the dynamic that they have and the roles that they're hiring for, and are they setting that information up and that person up for success in their role. So, not every festival or event is lucky enough to have staff working for months on their project. A lot of the times they maybe have a few group phone calls and then just show up on site and make it happen. And that's totally okay also. But it's important to just centralize this information, that whoever is making the deals gets that information to the person that has to handle it on the ground. And how that happens, not everybody needs a big complex software. Sometimes just a spreadsheet works, sometimes just emails work. But I think ultimately it comes down to communication between the lead producers and decision makers and the people that have to manage it on the ground, and connecting the dots there with the flow of information, and just making sure that everyone ultimately is handling all of the pieces that are being assumed that they're handling. And so it's kind of case by case basis, and just determining your own system. And then, maybe that worked, maybe it didn't. Having wrap notes at the end of the festival and talking about with your team, talking individually about what worked, what didn't, what did we forget about, and then, making changes the next year.